Hello everybody, I am Jared Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. In today's video, I'll be reacting to Asian Americans take a DNA test from Buzzfeed. It's going to be Asian American, so I'm guessing that they're all going to have a variation of Asian. Not quite sure what to expect other than that. Hopefully it'll be pretty good. It is a BuzzFeed video, so I'm just expecting them to stick with the admixtures, not really talk about genetic stuff or the genetic matches. It is possible they may talk about some of the medical stuff if they did 23andMe, which I believe the other BuzzFeed videos they've done 23andMe. So we'll see what the video holds, but before we jump into it, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help me out. Also, be sure to subscribe and click that bell for notifications on future videos. With all of that said, let's just go ahead and jump right into the video.
I don't know if I can handle this right now. This is so much.
Today, we are getting our DNA tested to see where our ancestors are from.
Many of our coworkers have done this before and have gotten wild results, and we wanted to see if this might apply to some of our Asian American coworkers at the company.
My folks have always been really private about a family history. Not only are they private about it, I feel like they go out of their way to even hide stuff from me sometimes.
My family is really open to talking about our Filipino heritage.
They have never really
The Filipino
told me
will be interesting to
even where
see.
in China I was from. They're just like China.
My mom.
With Filipino, I'm wondering how much Iberian there will be for him, if there is any. Or any other European mixtures in there, because the Philippines have had a pretty interesting history that a lot of people really don't know about.
And Dad always talked about like our immediate family. Aside from that, we don't really interact with aunts, uncles, cousins, or any of that.
We can't trace my family history back that far.
And I think that's because they actually don't know too much either.
The things they told me, I'm like, is that real? Like, are you sure?
There's got to be a lot of
The
variation
Philippines has
between all
always
of
been
these
conquered
testers.
by various other cultures and countries, so it's kind of hard to say what real Filipinos are. According to my dad, we came down from the mountains, so we weren't as conquered.
I've always believed my whole life that I was 100% Korean.
And my parents have always said my family's from China, but then my parents were born in Vietnam, so Chinese.
And my parents
Yeah, he's definitely gonna have a mix that I imagine he wouldn't have guessed.
have always told me that I'm 100% Indian. I started thinking that I might have other genetic codes in my DNA because my mom was born with blonde hair, and then she has an uncle with blue eyes and blonde hair.
I wonder if there's any like British Isles for her, because there was a whole lot of conquering of the Southeast Asian country or Southwest Asian countries by the British. So I know that there are British people that have Indian ancestry because of that, and I think actually that guy that owns that airline, Virgin Airlines, he has Indian ancestry that he found out through Finding Your Roots, I think. Either Finding Your Roots or Who Do You Think You Are, but I think it was Finding Your Roots.
My parents always told me I was Vietnamese. Recently, I found out I was part French.
Southeast Asia is a bit of a melting pot. I was raised to believe that I'm 100% Lao. I don't think I'm 100% Lao.
and my mom is Japanese and my dad is white. And I found out that my great-grandfather was adopted, so who knows?
I'm 50% Chinese and 50% Scottish and Irish.
23andMe.
So we got these little kids from 23andMe.
And we're gonna spit in a tube.
Spit take time. Quick with the spit take. I like that.
Mail this out because of history keeping in the Philippines and not a lot of access to those records.
And I've always wondered what my lineage was. Bloodlines is a really important thing in Korean culture.
I am hoping to find out whether there was some mixing back in the day or there wasn't.
I just honestly hope that I kind of get like this understanding of who I am. My entire family is really pale, and I'm like tan. Why am I tan?
As an individual, it is nice to feel proud.
My family, this is also information I can share with them too.
So we just got married, and I'm really hoping when I have kids, I can tell them what they are.
It'll be a way to bring my family closer together. My grandmother passed away. She was our family matriarch, and she was always the one to pass down stories about our family and our family's history. And now that she's gone, I want to keep that conversation going.
So I really hope that with this DNA test, feel like I really truly do belong somewhere.
You know, I find it interesting that a lot of people will have these same types of feelings when they're doing the DNA test. And as a genealogist, one thing that I'm always like, but do your genealogy. Like, if you're not doing your genealogy, you don't really learn the exact story. I mean, the DNA admixtures are great because you get an idea of what you are in an overall sense, but not necessarily. It's just telling you where your genes that you inherited come from. It doesn't tell where all of your ancestry comes from, and it doesn't tell the story of your ancestry. It can reveal stories, it can reveal skeletons in the family closet, but it doesn't really tell that story that a lot of them seem to allude to, where it's like, you know, the story of our ancestors, and it's like, if you do the genealogy, that's how you get the true story.
So it's been a few weeks. We're gonna get our DNA read.
My name's Juliana Cinchon. I'm a senior product specialist on the customer care team at
She's been on some other
can
ones
confirm
too.
What you already know, or it can totally surprise you. Not 100% Filipino. Pretty close though. 99.1% to the Philippines. You do have 0.8% Iberian.
It was the Iberian.
Which
It was the
means Spain
Iberian.
or Portugal.
That makes sense. My dad wasn't exaggerating when we came down from the mountains. I haven't been this proud about being Filipino in a while.
He's gonna have a flag on his desk.
No, I know.
I hear you think you're 100% Korean, is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
So you are 100% East Asian, 97.3% Korean,
Pretty high.
1.2% Chinese, and 1.2% Japanese. 0.3% broadly East Asian.
That's all in his DNA?
Yeah.
I feel good about it. I'm proud to be Korean. It feels good to be validated.
Are you now more fond of pot stickers?
Yes, and gyozas. For sure.
I'm pretty sure I'm 100% Chinese. That's all.
You're not 100% Chinese.
I knew
You're
it.
92.2% Chinese.
Oh, that's a high
mostly from
amount.
mainland China. You are 7.5% Vietnamese.
Oh, wow.
I think it does make me feel more connected to my Vietnamese side. It does make me want to go to Vietnam. I'm gonna have to go learn to read in Vietnamese. I just kind of picture my arm as Vietnamese. That's how I kind of like am splitting myself up.
So I know my relatives are from India, and when my mom was a baby, she had golden hair. I know the North in general, there is mixing. I just don't know if that mixing affected my family.
You are 100% Indian.
I mean,
Wow.
at the same time, I'm still like, why the hell does my great uncle have blonde hair and blue eyes?
It's possible that the uncle inherited DNA that was non-Indian that she didn't inherit. That's a very possible thing. It's not uncommon for people where, you know, you might have a third great grandparent that was fully English and, you know, you're Indian and you may not really inherit much of that DNA. So it's possible that she does have European in there.
It doesn't affect me and the way I live my life. I've been raised Indian.
It's also cool to compare with your siblings because siblings share 50% of their DNA, and so your results are expected to be similar, but not exactly the same.
So my parents always acknowledged that we were just Lao. I assume that means 100% Lao.
Because you look pretty mixed.
That's the thing, I get that a lot.
I thought you were mixed this whole time.
You are 100% East Asian, broken down into 79.8% Thailand.
Oh, wow. That is mind blowing.
You ready for the other percentage?
Oh yeah, I didn't even know there was another percentage. I'm still too in shock.
So you are 19.8% Chinese.
Now, the question that I would have, and I'm not sure if they're going to talk about this at all, but do they have Lao as a population group that they define? Because it is possible that, you know, that they're not defining Lao as Lao, they're defining it as something else. So that reading of Thai might just be that they don't have the population groups from Laos, but I don't know if that's the case. I honestly don't know a whole lot of in-depth information when it comes to the Asian American admixtures as well, because part of understanding those admixtures is understanding the history of the population migrations in those areas. So I don't know the connection between Thailand and Laos, but it could be very possible that that's what's happening, is that it's reading that Lao as Thai, and so it's just coming up as Thai and Chinese instead. but it could just be that he is Thai and Chinese.
That's a big
chunk.
One match strength with Taiwan.
I think I'm still processing it all, and there's as many levels to my shock right now. Feels like my identity's been changed.
Pretty sure I'm like mostly Vietnamese. There is some French in me.
It looks like you are 100%.
What?
It's broken down into 76.4% Southeast Asian from Vietnam, 20.8% Chinese, and 0.7% broadly East Asian, 2.1% broadly East Asian and Native American. So let's take a look.
Wait, did you just say Native American? I'm not even like a little bit French. I'm talking to my mom tonight.
It's important to keep in mind that just because you don't have this particular
They don't talk about how the Native American genetic admixture is often it's often called as just East Asia or just Asian and Native American because they can't always tell it apart. So I'm kind of a little unhappy that they don't mention that because that's something that should be mentioned in my mind. But it might be that the Buzzfeed people were the ones to cut it out, and not necessarily that it wasn't said.
ancestry in your DNA doesn't mean that your family history is wrong, or you inherit 50% of your DNA from each of your parents. So it could just mean if there is French DNA, you just didn't inherit any. The best way to see this is to have one of your parents' genotype.
I am mind blown. I don't know if I can handle this right now. I didn't even think I could be a little bit Chinese. As a part of me that's so uncharted.
You like pot stickers more than Gene.
Yeah, my family is gonna be like, nah, that's all wrong. Like, I spit into a tube.
I'm thinking 50% Japanese, 50% British.
49.5% Japanese, 0.3% Native American.
Oh, interesting.
And 0.4% broadly East Asian. The European is 48.8%, but you are not just British.
Oh, okay.
21.9%
Scandinavian.
French and
Oh,
German.
French and German in there. Yeah, that makes sense.
You're more French than Kevin.
Oh my God, Kevin's gonna be so sad.
Our British and Irish reference population, you have 19.1%, the United Kingdom. You also have 2.2%
Scandinavian.
And then 4.6% broadly Northwestern European. We also have 0.5% West African.
That's like so many different regions.
If you were ever looking to travel based on your DNA, you have a lot of places to pick from.
So you said that I was 0.03 Native American? Does that mean I have a Native American ancestor for sure?
Not
It's in your
necessarily.
DNA because it was passed down to you from some ancestor. We're looking at the last 500 years. There are people that might not see Native American ancestry in their DNA. It doesn't mean that the family history that they know about themselves is not true.
Okay, this is making it seem like that 0.3% is, yeah, you definitely got that from an ancestor, so you definitely have a Native American ancestor. It could be a misread. They may be misreading it at 23andMe. They may be misdefining it. So that's a little misleading the way that she's saying it, or at least the way that it's edited to make it seem like, yeah, you could. It's definitely Native American and it's coming from somewhere in your family tree. Yeah, she got the DNA that was then read as Native American, but that doesn't mean that 23andMe is correct in defining it as Native American. And at 0.3%, it's such a small amount with her having Asian ancestry, it makes more sense that it's probably some sort of misread or they just haven't figured that out yet.
Just means that in terms of DNA, they just didn't get it.
I've always just thought I'm half Chinese and half Scottish and Irish.
You are 24.2% French and German.
What? Are you serious? Oh my god.
Let's see. This is from 2018, so it's guaranteed that the results have changed since then. Although I should say that the latest results that 23andMe has are not available unless you update to the V5 chip. So if you tested to 23andMe in the past, you're going to have to pay more to get the newest admixture, which I think is completely pointless. It's not useful, especially if you're doing genealogy, which unfortunately 23andMe is doing a lot of unpleasant things to the genealogy community, putting a lot behind an extra paywall and just a lot of things that really aren't worth the money. So unfortunately 23andMe is kind of not one of the ones that I suggest to people now when they ask who should I test with for genealogy.
9% British. You have 4.1% broadly Northwestern European DNA, which is where your Scottish ancestry could also be.
All right, let's talk the Asian side now, and please tell me my life is not a lie, and that I actually am Chinese. Otherwise, I'm totally gonna freak out.
You're 47.1% Chinese.
Yeah, my life is not a lie.
And then you do have 1.3% Southeast Asian.
So after finding out that I was 100% Indian, I was still curious as to whether there was any mixing at all. My mom took a DNA test, and it turns out that she's 7% Irish, Scottish, and Welsh.
See, there you
and
go.
4% Scandinavian.
So she didn't inherit any of the European from her mom. Everything she inherited was the Indian, and that goes to show the randomness of recombination. When your parents create you, their DNA is recombined, and then put together, and that's how you're created, and you're only getting 50% of each, 50% from your mom, 50% from your dad. So there's a whole 50% chunk that you're not getting from your mom, and a whole 50% chunk you're not getting from your dad. So this just goes to show her mom had a huge percentage. What was it, 7 something? Let's go back just a little bit.
Mom took a DNA test, and it turns out that she's 7% Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, and 4% Scandinavian. So there was some mixing.
11% European, which would equate about to a great-grandparent who's full European, maybe a second great-grandparent. So, and if she's not inheriting any of that European, that means that could be from, a second or third great-grandparent of hers, maybe a fourth great-grandparent if it's just, randomly that her mom got a lot. But it really doesn't go that far back to not see some of these things. So if you're thinking of, like, for my third great grandparents, most of my third great grandparents were born early 1800s. So, not even 200 years ago, really, or just 200 years ago. So, it doesn't take long for that DNA to dwindle out. And it could also be, if she has siblings, those siblings may have inherited a ton of that European. So she might have a sibling where they inherited almost all of it, and they have almost 10% European, where she has none.
I just didn't get any of that DNA. Still cool to know.
I kind of came into it thinking that my parents were like private because they don't want to talk about it, but now I kind of get a sense that they're private because they just don't know.
You very often identify with where you were born or where your parents were born 500 years ago. You don't have records. If you're not into genealogy, then there's no way that you would know. There's a difference between.
But you could find out if you work hard enough sometimes.
Genetics.
All right. It was an okay video. It was kind of one of those typical 23andMe, Buzzfeed type of things that I would expect. I feel like some of the other ones I watched were a bit better. I'm not 100% sure, but there's a lot of things said in this that were either edited in a way that are misleading, or it was just done in a misleading way when she originally explained it. A lot of what I expected for the different results. I think for many of them, they weren't as mixed as I would personally expect on their Asian side. Like, a lot of them had, when they said they were Chinese, they were like 90-something% Chinese. Like, they were pretty dead on when it came to their Asian American sides, except for the guy from Laos. But the question being, is Lao one of the population groups defined by 23andMe? I don't personally know if it is. I mean, there are so many countries in the world, and, if you're going to try to define every single one by DNA, it's going to be impossible, because a lot of different countries have basically the same population groups as some of the countries next to it, and so you can't really tell them apart. It's kind of like when you get Scandinavian. There are a lot of countries that are covered by Scandinavia. So very, very interesting. I did like how the girl who was Indian did have her mother go to test and found that even though she had no European in her ancestry, her mother had 11%. That goes to show you just what recombination can do. So very, very interesting on that front. Overall, so video. Wish they would have explained some things better and not been misleading, kind of. But a lot of these videos, when they go into it, they really focus on those trace results, or they don't fully explain the trace results. And I'm not the biggest fan of that. So it is what it is. Well, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out. You can also click right about here if you'd like to subscribe. It's completely free to do so. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at GeneaVlogger. I'm the GeneaVlogger. See you in my next video.